There are no more excuses to make. Matt LaFleur is one of the best coaches in the NFL.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you'll find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. It is time to give it up for Matt LaFleur. What he has done, and we hit on this a little yesterday, but I want to expand on it. I was writing a piece for The Leap yesterday, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to, and it struck me. When you look around the league, how many coaches could do what Matt LaFleur has done culturally, schematically, with veteran players, with young players? Most of the time, coaches are one or the other. They are developmental coaches. Hey, you put a young roster with this team and he will help them reach a floor of competency. Or you take a coach with a bunch of veteran players and he will help them reach their ceiling. But in either case, you need the circumstances to be right for them. Matt LaFleur has proven he can do both. And as you look around the league, I'm just not sure there are that many coaches who can say the same thing, who are just as adept as leaders as they are schematic influencers, who can handle a multi-time MVP, even just being diplomatic about what Aaron Rodgers is. And we have a little bit more to say about Aaron. It is a difficult personality to manage any all-time great quarterback. Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, any of these guys. It's not even unique to Aaron. But then to also be able to follow it up and nurture Jordan Love the way that he did. There just aren't that many other guys in the league. Like, is John Harbaugh going to be able to do that the same way? No, because he's not the guy driving the train on offense. They've gone through a slew of offensive coordinators in Baltimore trying to find the right balance. He's not the straw that stirs that offensive drink. He is a culture setter. He's not a scheme guy. Dan Campbell in Detroit. He's a culture setter. He's not a scheme guy. Ben Johnson is the guy doing all that. Sean McVay is both. I think Kyle Shanahan is a bit of both. I don't know if every team in the league should want to emulate the culture that the Kansas City Chiefs have. I think they have a coach who is one of the great offensive minds of the last 30 years and a quarterback who is on track to be the greatest of all time. Maybe at some point, some of these issues with culture, some of the guys that they're willing to bring in and take risks on is going to hurt them. Hasn't really happened so far, though they did have to get rid of Tyreek Hill, or they efforted to do so. And I went to look it up. How has Matt LaFleur done against some of the other best coaches in the league? And it is maybe more impressive than you realized. Matt LaFleur is 4-0 against Sean McVay, including a playoff win. He is 2-1 against Andy Reid, and that one was Jordan Love's first ever start on the road on short notice. He's 2-0 against Mike McCarthy, Super Bowl champion Mike McCarthy. And we actually are going to talk a little bit more about Mike McCarthy later in the show. He's 1-0 against John Harbaugh. Now, that was Tyler Huntley, but still won that game. 1-0 against his buddy, Mike McDaniel. 1-0 against Zach Taylor, another guy on his same tree. 1-0 against Bill Belichick. Now, 1-1 against Mike Tomlin. Last year, tough game. Now you have a kicker miss a crucial kick that should be a layup. You drive the ball down twice in what could be game-winning field goal situations, but you have to score touchdowns in those situations. Not what you want, but that was that Pittsburgh game that the Packers kept pointing to and saying, this is how we knew that this team was and this quarterback was special. 1-2 against Sean Payton. One of those losses came this last year during that losing streak with Jordan Love. 2-2, and one of them was like the inexplicable week 1 loss. They ended up playing great that year, but week 1, you just took a dump on the field. 2-2 against Kevin O'Connor. Kevin O'Connor, okay, you have week 1 again, the Packers bugaboo. They blow the Vikings out in that fraudulent season. And then this last year, during that losing streak, you lose to the Vikings, and then you blow the doors off them. Now, the two that you worry a little bit about, Kyle Shanahan, 2-4. 2-1 in the regular season, 0-3 in the playoffs. And this idea of letting the 49ers off the hook, we're going to explore this a little bit later. I'm excited to do that. And then 2-4 against Dan Campbell. Now, one of those losses is in 2021 when they sat their starters in week 18. So they were not trying to win that game. They did not need to win that game. Their starters did not play in that game, a full game. And so I think that one you can kind of put to the side a little bit. And then you also look back at 2022. They got swept in 2022. Well, Aaron Rodgers throws 3 interceptions in one of the most inexplicably horrible games I've ever seen Aaron Rodgers play in a season where he was clearly just checked out. And then week 18, speaking of one of the worst games I've ever seen Aaron Rodgers play, the worst no-show of Aaron Rodgers' career in a big spot. You have to beat a Lions team that is not and cannot go to the postseason at home in your building, and your quarterback no-shows. It's hard for me to blame that on Matt LaFleur. And then when you go and you look at what has changed since, what has transpired since, and what they did last year, it is hard to overstate the obstacles they were able to not only overcome, but thrive in spite of, or maybe because of. This is one of the best coaches in the league. And you cannot say anymore that it's just Aaron Rodgers. That excuse is gone. And Mike Pettin, the defense, cost them a playoff game. He fired that coach. The special teams cost them a playoff game. He fired that coach. The defense cost them seeding and another playoff game. He fired that coach. Now, was hiring Mo Drayton in the first place and then keeping Mo Drayton part of the problem? Yes. Was hiring Joe Barry and then keeping Joe Barry part of the problem? Yes. But you can't say he's not willing to make changes on the fly to try and get this right. And the further we get from 2022, the more it becomes obvious that any of the criticisms, really of the last 2 coaches, fall flatter now than they maybe did then. We're going to talk about that more on Locked On Packers. Let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising costs of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand of every great investor. All of your portfolios in one place. The number one destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Link your accounts together, 401ks, other investments, a comprehensive perspective, all there for you. For a comprehensive look at the financial news and analysis, visit the brand every great investor uses, yahoofinance.com. The number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. The excuses about Matt LaFleur are gone, not just because of Matt LaFleur. I'll explain that in a second. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For a long time, it was easy to say, look, Mike McCarthy was carried by Aaron Rodgers. Matt LaFleur, we don't know how good he is because he has Aaron Rodgers. Now, I have done my best to dismantle the Matt LaFleur part of this. Look at the end of the Mike McCarthy era in Green Bay and look at the beginning of the Matt LaFleur era with the Packers. And you cannot tell me that there isn't an impact. Look at the schematic differences, the structural differences, the evolution, all of the things that Matt LaFleur brought to bear on this offense. You can't say, oh, it was just Aaron Rodgers being Aaron Rodgers when he wasn't Aaron Rodgers like that with Mike McCarthy. And what's more, 3 straight 13-win seasons was something that the Packers never did. In fact, they didn't even go back-to-back with 13-win seasons under Mike McCarthy. So you can't just say it's Aaron Rodgers because Mike McCarthy had that guy too and had him in his physical prime with deeper receiver rooms with Greg Jennings and Donald Driver and Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb and James Jones and Jermichael Finley and all these guys. And now you look, and I think we can widen the scope on the Matt LaFleur part of this. And not because Rodgers failed with the Jets, because this is not a let's rag on Rodgers segment. That's not what we're doing here. This is not really about Aaron Rodgers. This is actually about these two coaches. Dak Prescott just had the best season of his career in an offense that Cowboys fans, Cowboys media, NFL media were wailing and gnashing teeth and rending garments over because Mike McCarthy was taking over. The golden child, Kellen Moore, was out. And this was, Mike McCarthy talked about wanting to run the ball. And Dak Prescott comes out and until the last month, I thought was the MVP of the league. It was proof in a lot of ways that it's Mike McCarthy. He is one of the drivers of the success that Dak Prescott had. And one of the drivers of the success that the Packers had in the 2010s. Go back to 2007 with Brett Favre, rejuvenated his career. We know about what happened with the mechanics and the structural changes to the fundamentals with Aaron Rodgers. And now we're seeing him in Dallas. I understand they're not having playoff success. But one of the reasons why they're not having playoff success, if you go back to this last season when the Packers flambéed them on national television, it's Dan Quinn, who just got a freaking head coaching job for reasons that escape me. But the structure of that defense, what Dan Quinn wanted it to be, the small ball that they were trying to play, it just didn't work. And I think part of it is, Mike McCarthy didn't necessarily choose to hitch his wagons to Dak Prescott. That is a Jerry Jones thing. I don't know why I just said his name so weirdly. Dak Prescott. But he got the best out of Dak Prescott. And in the biggest moment, Dak played like we've seen Dak play in the biggest moments, which is to say, not very well. I don't know how much to put on Mike McCarthy when it comes to that, because it wasn't like the plan was the problem. And now, all of the things that we've said about Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love, hey, he's had success with Jordan Love, a young quarterback, a first-year starter, all the upheaval, all the turmoil, all the weird stuff around him. Look at that success. You can no longer say that Rodgers backpacked that guy. You have to just say he's a really good football coach. That's it. Like, those criticisms are out the window. And the reason I'm bringing up the McCarthy stuff is the McCarthy stuff is actually more evidence of Matt LaFleur's prowess. Because when you look at it, if it's actually not the case, as many have indicated, and I would count myself among them for a long time, that some part, at least part of the 2010s run was held back by Mike McCarthy. And by the way, I still think that is true in some ways, especially in 2014, the NFC Championship game. I mean, some of the decisions were just unconscionable as far as football decisions go, right? But when you consider what he's done since, and when you consider that when Matt LaFleur showed up, Aaron Rodgers said, no, I want to keep doing the Mike McCarthy thing. Even after winning MVP in 2020, said, I actually want to do more of the McCarthy thing. And then went to New York, brought Nathaniel Hackett with him to New York. Nathaniel Hackett's dad, Paul Hackett. That's the offense that Aaron Rodgers brought with him. Well, do you know who learned offense in the NFL from Paul Hackett? Mike McCarthy. They're running a version of the Mike McCarthy offense in New York. Rodgers wants to do the McCarthy thing in New York. So how can we say that Mike McCarthy held Aaron Rodgers back when all Aaron Rodgers wants to do is the McCarthy thing? And how can we say that the personnel held the Packers back when Aaron Rodgers took all those personnel people with him to New York? So at some point, and this is not, though it is convenient, this is not about Aaron Rodgers. I'm using the Rodgers part of this as an explanation for this broader point about Matt LaFleur. You can't, on the same level that we used to talk about the way Rodgers carried the 2010s in Green Bay. I think the evidence is growing stronger that that's not exactly what happened. And that's certainly what the evidence right now is telling us about what's going on in Green Bay with Matt LaFleur. Because the best this offense looked was in 2020 when they played the purest distillation of the Matt LaFleur version of the offense. And you cannot say, and I hear this from Aaron Rodgers stands all the time, well, how do we know that that's the Matt LaFleur version and not the Aaron Rodgers version? Well, because the next year, after he threw the hissy fit, they played a different style of offense. And now in New York, they're not doing all the stuff that they were doing in 2020. They're doing the stuff that they were doing in 2015, in 1995. So those excuses, all of the excuses that we had for why Matt LaFleur actually wasn't a good coach because of the quarterback. That's why we had to talk about Aaron Rodgers. Not to criticize. It's not even a criticism of Aaron Rodgers. It's really, really not. If all you hear is the criticism, that is a you problem. Because it's not a criticism of Rodgers. It is framing what we're trying to express here. And that is that you can't anymore, in good faith, say it was the quarterback. Not about Mike McCarthy, not about Matt LaFleur, because they have proven successful, maximized other players and maximize Aaron Rodgers as well. Okay. I'm glad we did that. I'm glad I got that off my chest. And I want to talk about how the season ended. And this idea of moral victories. That's next on Locked On Packers. Yesterday, I had someone send me the view from their seat. They had bought Packers tickets, and they were so excited to go. Game Time gives you the chance to get excited about the tickets you're going to buy. This was a Locked On Packers listener, by the way, that sent me the view from their seat. And what product do I talk about all the time that has views from their seat? Game Time. Game Time. You're making your plans. You're looking at the Packers schedule. You're going, okay, NFC North. Do I want to do that? Do I want to see CJ Stroud? Do I want a night game? Do I want a holiday game? Game Time has it all. Easy to find and buy NFL tickets for every kind of event in your area. If you're not near Green Bay, that's okay. If you're not planning to travel to Green Bay, that's okay. Game Time can still help you. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets of any kind with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. I want to talk about the way the season ended in a second. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This quote from Keyshawn Nixon. Diamondor Lenore found it, did not like it. And then there spiraled this discourse about the Packers and the 49ers. And Rob Guerrero, a.k.a. Stats, who you may have seen on, our On with our friend Kay Adams, on Up and Adams, 49ers guy. And he's a nice guy. It's not about that. Not a personal thing. But he said, I've never seen a team get more credit for simply keeping a game close than the Packers have gotten for last year's playoff game. And here's the thing. I don't believe in moral victories the way that they are commonly understood. Where you go, oh, well, I should feel good because we almost won. No. I feel in my life very much like Keyshawn Nixon does. You feel pissed off. You let someone off the hook. But unequivocally what happened was the Packers let the 49ers off the hook. They blew that game. And that's the funny part is you go, 49ers fans will go, oh, well, they blew it. Jordan Love threw a couple interceptions. They blew that game. Yes, that's the whole point. They blew it. They were in control of that football game for 55 minutes. That's good. It's bad that they lost. And the losing, is ultimately all that matters in a lot of ways. Now, the reason the hanging with the 49ers is silly is because they didn't hang with the 49ers. They controlled the game for 55 minutes as a 9-8 team with the youngest offense, the youngest team in the league, the youngest offense we've ever seen from a pass catcher standpoint, first-year quarterback, all of the stuff that I say over and over every show. They were a touchdown underdog on the road against the number one seed in the NFC, the favorite to win the Super Bowl when the playoffs started. In fact, the favorite to win the Super Bowl for most of the season. And they were beating that team for 55 minutes. That matters. It matters. It's not okay that they, that's the part of the moral victory thing that I think people glom onto. that somehow it's okay that you lost because you almost won. No, that's nonsense. But yes, there is some credit in some circumstances that has to be given for teams that are not expected to keep a game close, that are not expected to win, that do one of those things and nearly do the other. When we're talking about the quality of the game, the quality of the opponent, the quality of their play, the projections for what they can be this year. Yes, that game, the fact that you nearly beat who was clearly the best team in the NFC. I mean, there was no dispute in the second half of the year. The best team in the NFC was the San Francisco 49ers. And Green Bay, who is not expected to be anywhere near them, by all rights, had that game won and they blew it. It's not like 2014 when you have the MVP of the league, you are the number 2 seed, you go to Seattle, you outplay the Seahawks for, again, 55, 58 minutes and blow it at the end. It's not the same. It's not the same. There was no moral victory there. There was no, well, they almost won. No, they should have won. Those teams were pretty equal going in. You have the best player on the field. The opposing quarterback throws 4 interceptions. You have to win that game. You have to win that game. The stakes were different. And so the context forces us to say this was a different set of circumstances. And so when the reason it matters is you're trying to push this forward. Well, who are the best teams in the NFC? Well, we know the 49ers. Then there are 2 teams that really can say reasonably, we should have beat that 49ers team in the playoffs when it mattered the most. The Eagles can say that too, probably, if they wanted to. They did beat them last year, but no quarterback, right? The Cowboys certainly can't say that. And the Eagles at the end of the year were playing like absolute butt cheeks. I'm sorry, they were. That's what they were. The idea that the Eagles are somehow ahead of the Packers right now, it doesn't pass the blink test for me. Did you watch them at the end of the year? Why are they going to be significantly better than that? Because of Vic Fangio, a guy that Javon Holland was trying to kick out the door in Miami and has made it clear, I wanted that guy out of here? Okay, if that's what you think. It matters that the Packers really should have beat the 49ers based on the way that game went as a 9-8 team on the road that had no business being there. And it matters that the Lions blew that game to the 49ers. Yes, it also matters that the 49ers won. But if we're going to stack the NFC, to me, it starts with those 3 teams. And then we can have a conversation about anyone else. But it's those 3 teams for me in the NFC. And the reason is easy. Because the 49ers were the metric. They were the measuring stick. And the Packers and the Lions were the only teams, when it mattered, at the end of the year, who said, we are as good as this team. Which makes this upcoming season really, really fun. All right, back tomorrow to close out the week. We've got a ton of stuff coming next week. Maddie Hudak, who covered Michael Pratt, is going to be on the show. Joey Van Zummeren, who covered Tyron Hopper, formerly of Underage Packers, he is going to be on the show. Our pal Jason Hirschhorn, America's guest, is going to be on the show, and I'm going to be on vacation. So we will talk to you very soon tomorrow, and then next week we're going to have a bunch of cool stuff for you, waiting for you in your podcast feed. No show on Monday, just so you know. Memorial Day, enjoy it, go outside, have fun. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Anywhere you get podcasts, go subscribe. On YouTube, go subscribe. On social media, go subscribe. Instagram, Locked On Packers. TikTok, Locked On Packers. YouTube, Locked On Packers. So you can stay Locked On Packers.